Hello, my name is Anna Vick, and I am presenting my social-emotional learning approach that will be utilized for my building in the upcoming school year in response to the critical incident that I submitted for my first part of this assignment. As a review of the critical incident that occurred, the student in question, this is at the high school level, became escalated, and he was physically aggressive against himself, property, and others. He was in an emotional and behavioral crisis, and he was very dysregulated. The student does have a trauma background, by the way, and is also on the autism spectrum. He's placed in a center-based program for students with serious emotional disabilities, now referred to as the Affective Needs Program, within the regular high school setting. The responders to the situation were security team members, administration, and the school resource officer. There was use of CPI restraint and handcuffs, and those that were utilized to ensure that the student was safe. The student was picked up by a parent and was able to de-escalate, but we did have to move into manifestation determination because the staff member was assaulted during this process, as well as the school resource officer being assaulted. The student did return to the school because the disability did manifest, and that was after 5 days. So the objective of the professional development that is being proposed in this presentation is to prepare the stakeholders, and specifically those who responded in this incident and would respond in future incidents, to effectively work with students and make sure that they're implementing a trauma-based approach. So it's really about providing practitioners with the resources they need to encourage social-emotional learning for students, skills of self-regulation, trauma-informed approaches in a time of behavioral crisis, especially when safety is at risk. According to Growing Roses in Concrete, a video provided in this course, there is a great deal of trauma that students may experience, and something that was a conclusion that I drew from that video is that we're often unaware of this trauma. The trauma could be related to poverty, gang violence. There are many different issues of abuse that might occur. Students may have been neglected or maybe dealing with drug and alcohol abuse within the home. There are multiple variables, foster care, different things that can occur within families that can cause students to have social emotional issues in school. And the 3 core concepts video provided in the class also gave us information about the influence of trauma on child development and even on brain development. We've learned that there often is a lack of trauma-informed approach or trauma-informed work in the school setting, or that we don't quite have it right when it comes to supporting these students. Particularly, Hoffman down below makes the point about lack of sensitivity to diversity and the fact that this cultural lack of awareness can affect our instruction in social-emotional learning. Even if we're trying to do it, we may be missing the mark. And this brings us back to the idea of social justice and making sure that we're making that learning accessible to all students, regardless of culture or background, and supporting them and avoiding that school-to-prison pipeline. Adamu and Hogan make the point about the value of a positive relationship between students and the school to avoid that school-to-prison pipeline as well. And trauma-informed approaches are a big part of this, rather than just a punitive action taken by the school. Teaching social-emotional skills and social-emotional learning is necessary for post-secondary success, and we have that responsibility and that duty to our students. According to both Educate the Heart, the video provided to us within the course, and the Weisberg reading provided to us within the course. Very important for post-secondary success at graduation, career readiness, independent living, etc. Senge provides us with 5 disciplines for growth in an organization, and this professional development will be targeting growth in the awareness and ability of stakeholders to implement trauma-informed approaches and teach students social-emotional skills, especially during times of crisis and behavioral escalation. The proposed plan for this session is that professional development will be provided to the staff. This will be a 60-minute session upon the return of all stakeholders to school before students have arrived. So during that brief time before students begin to attend school again in August, the proposed professional development would take place as a 60-minute session with the final 10 minutes reserved for Q&A. The professional development would include a review of videos such as the video referenced in this previous slide, Growing Roses in Concrete, as well as Educate the Heart in 2012, provide to us within the course. That would be part of the professional development and select clips from Growing Roses in Concrete in the interest of time. Website articles such as the resources discussed on the previous slide, where all of this research is provided, would also be reviewed, and main ideas would be given to those stakeholders for information and background before the activities are provided to them. A wiki space would also be opened for access, all stakeholders to be able to research and read and review the articles cited in the previous slide. This PowerPoint presentation will also include example assignments that could be used during the professional development, in detail about the follow-up, the surveys that will be utilized, interviews with stakeholders to continue to check in on progress and follow up both in December and in May, with brief follow-up sessions for reviewing this content and the results of the interviews and surveys. Stakeholders targeted for this professional development will be administration, teachers, service providers, classified staff, security, the school resource officer, and counselors and mental health staff. So really every employee that can attend should attend, because this content is very important. This is my conceptual map. It shows my list of stakeholders. Main idea is my social emotional learning professional development with an emphasis on trauma-informed approaches during behavioral crisis to teach social emotional skills such as self-regulation. So 3 components will be the professional development lecture, or the information provided, the videos and research referenced in the previous slides. Sample assignments for activities used after that research is provided during the professional development, which will be on upcoming slides. And information on follow-up surveys and interviews to monitor the effectiveness of the professional development. So to assess the effectiveness of the program, keeping in mind the Flowman content in 2016, the observation in particular, and how biased or subjective this measure can be. So to avoid that bias, we will use multiple measures. We're going to be paying attention to suspensions, expulsions, restraints, manifestation, determination, to find out if we're seeing reduction in those numbers, to know that teaching these skills of trauma-informed approaches and social-emotional skill instruction is working for the stakeholders to then positively impact students. And staff learning will be measured and identified through surveys, which will be distributed twice during the year, December and May, and interviews with select stakeholders, so particular teachers who might interface with students with behavioral issues, school resource officer, and security, who respond first to most of these issues. Administration could also interview. And then the Q&A time will be an opportunity to take a pulse on staff learning and find out what the questions might be. So one example assignment that could be utilized during this professional development would be to go over the 5 disciplines, which are pictured here on this slide. Explain Senge's work, and then put the participants and stakeholders into small groups and request that they identify how each of these can be used in this process of trauma-informed work and social-emotional learning, and figuring out how to teach those skills for stakeholders to come together and have buy-in and value to change the organization and increase awareness. A second option for an assignment or activity to be used during the professional development would be pairing stakeholders up into partners and requesting that they create 2 to 3 scenarios for case studies, opportunities to implement social emotional learning and instruction or trauma-informed approaches. So they can take information from the videos, resources, and research cited on the previous slides. They'll also be encouraged to use real-life student experiences if they choose to do so, but not to include any identifying information for the case studies. And then they'll identify their responses to the scenarios based on all of the content, social emotional learning, social justice, trauma-informed approaches that they've reviewed in the research previous to this activity. Finally, for more information on the assessment of the effectiveness of the professional development, surveys may address using a Likert scale or maybe some open-ended questions. And these will be provided through Google Docs as a Google form, and these will go into the inboxes of the stakeholders, and we'll request that participation. So on a scale from 1 to 5, comfortable, not comfortable, that measure will be provided for stakeholders to respond. 3 bullet points there are some examples of questions that might be asked on the survey. So how comfortable would you feel about approaching a physical escalation, using a trauma-informed approach, having an honest conversation when a student opens up regarding background or trauma, or including social emotional content and instruction on a daily basis through activities like mindfulness, sharing of experiences, active listening practice, etc. So we'll identify their comfort level to help figure out the effectiveness of the learning to help measure that through this professional development and the evaluation of those things afterwards. The follow-up interviews will be more conversational, and they'll give an opportunity for a further layer of depth in responses. These could be utilized with key stakeholders such as the SRO, security, administration, or teachers that interface with students who have behavioral challenges. So some of the questions asked in the interviews might be key takeaways from the professional development. What's your biggest reservation incorporating these ideas? How can the school make you feel more supported? What other ideas would you like to investigate about these topics? And then another measure will be the question and answer session after the professional development, and that will be implemented as a component of the refresher follow-up sessions in both December and May. These are my references, and these are the resources that would be provided on the wiki space, as well as introduced to the stakeholders and discussed with them during the professional development session. Thank you.